mean, I sound kind of like a smart Kermit the Frog.
You're pretty bold and ambitious to compare yourself to Kermit, king of green.
And it's not easy being green. Right, in 3, 2, and 1. Welcome to Missouri Law Matters, a podcast all about your Missouri court system. I'm your host, Matt Hamner. I'm a judge on the Missouri Court of Appeals in the Southern District, which is based in Springfield. My guest today is the Honorable Judge Aaron Koeppen. Thank you so much for being here today, Judge.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being here today, and I appreciate everybody tuning in, listening today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, etc. Wherever you get your podcast, you can look for us there. Also, if you want audio and video, if you don't just want to hear us gab, check out our podcast feed on our YouTube page as well. Finally, don't forget to follow the Missouri Supreme Court on Facebook and Instagram, and we appreciate their willingness and helping us out in making this podcast possible. Joining me today is Judge Koeppen. Judge Koeppen is currently the presiding judge in the 26th Judicial Circuit here in the state of Missouri. That consists of 5 counties, which kind of circle Lake of the Ozarks, correct?
That's correct.
Now, Judge Koeppen has been a judge for how many years now?
14, going on 15.
14 years as a trial judge in this area. You're currently a circuit judge. You started out as an associate circuit judge in Camden County, correct?
Yep.
All right. Before that, you're a prosecuting attorney and also practiced privately.
And defense attorney, yeah,
And
for a prosecutor.
Tell folks how you ended up here in Missouri.
Well, back when I graduated from law school, which was not too far from the time that you graduated from law school, the profession was kind of slim pickings. It was tough to find a job in as a lawyer right out of law school with a firm or in any other area. And so got an internship working for the public defender's office down here in Missouri between my second and third year of law school, and took that internship, came down here and loved it. Did a lot of trial work, kind of as just a clerk, if you will, a paid clerk. And I grew up in this area. And so it was kind of fun to come back home, where home was for me growing up. And whenever I graduated from law school, they offered me a job to come down here, and I was married and I had 2 kids, so I couldn't really afford to just go hang a shingle up somewhere and hope that I could put bread on the table for my kids, my family. So I took whatever job I could find, and I was blessed to have a great little job coming out of law school, and the rest is history. And then just grew in the profession from there.
And you have a wonderful family, Lake the Ozarks. You have called home for a long time, much as I have. And that's how our paths crossed and how you and I got to know each other. You went to Utah State for undergrad. Tell the folks what you did at Utah State.
Well, I played soccer, and then I also met my wife at Utah State and got married while we were at Utah State, and the rest is history. We had a lot of fun there, skiing, snowboarding, all kinds of fun stuff.
You got your law degree from Creighton University, which I thought was a basketball school. Do they have a law school there?
That's funny. Yes, they have a law school there. It's a great law school, especially if you want to be a trial attorney.
You've been a judge for a while, and your background precedes you, and I'm excited to have you on today, but not because of your background and all those things. I wanted to have you on today because, like me, you are a fellow film and television buff, as I am. I'm really excited to be talking about this today. I get asked all the time, whenever I'm out at events and interacting with people, how I got interested in law.
Right.
Or when did I know that I wanted to become a lawyer? Or when did I know that I wanted to become a judge? And the answer that I always give folks is, the things that I saw as a kid on television, or the movies that I saw, or the books I read. I think that is most people's first interaction with the legal system and with the law is they see it on a television show or in a movie, or they read about it in a book or something like that. And that got me to thinking about that would be an excellent idea for a podcast to talk a little bit about these media forms that we first encounter the court system in, the impression that these movies and these shows make on us, and the expectations we had about the law and the court system going into it. Maybe talk about some of our favorites, and then what all that means and how that maybe affects people's perception of our courts. And if there's anything that we want people to know that these movies or shows maybe have told them wrong, and that maybe we need to correct. And so that's the general direction I'm thinking that we're going to take today.
And I think we're going to have fun because I think this topic, people relate to it. It is a universal love language, so to speak. Legal movies about law, lawyers, judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, you name it. And it's been growing in popularity too. There's more and more movies and TV series that are law-based than probably ever before.
These movies and shows, they're kind of a great uniter. Because whether or not you're a lawyer or a judge, everybody knows a good TV show about the law, or everybody knows a good movie about the law. It seems, at least in this day and age, particularly with streaming becoming so popular, there's been this explosion true crime podcasts and documentaries. We're really seeing a lot of interest in this area. Why do you think that of all the media that we've had for almost a century now, why is it that courtrooms and legal dramas and legal situations have been such a fountain of information and a fountain of content for movies and TV?
That's a good question. I think there's some good reasons, some very bad reasons, some entertainment industry reasons, but I would say that a courtroom setting is one of those very rare settings in which you have a culmination of multiple different emotions and interests and people that come together and hash out disputes. That makes for pretty good entertainment. I mean, even real life entertainment. I mean, if the average person goes and sits in a courtroom, depending on what kind of docket it is, maybe with the exception of like your boring associate civil return docket, you're probably not going to get much interest out of that. But go to an order of protection docket or a contested divorce, child custody proceeding, or even a criminal case, a pretty high profile criminal case that's in the middle of a trial, you're going to immediately experience a very unique, heavy feeling that attaches to a lot that touches on a lot of emotions. And that makes for good TV. It makes for good reality shows. It makes for good books. There are things that are involved in the justice system that you can recreate in the form of a movie, a TV show, a book, or some kind of news article or a reality show. So I think one, it's just a perfect setting for creating good entertainment, things that excite people, get their minds going, get them pulled in. I would say that there's been a lot of bad things that have happened in our history that have found their way back to the courtroom or the justice system. And that's created some controversy that also makes for good TV shows or movies, some tragedies that have happened in courtrooms, some miscarriages of justice. I think that it's safe to say that not everything that's happened in the justice system has been great. There's been a lot of bad that's happened in the justice system over the years too that has laid the groundwork for some good shows, some good books, and controversial movies, if you will.
Two things that kind of popped into my mind when I asked you this question when we were talking about it is I think that anytime that you're trying to tell a good story, and that's what TV and movies try to do, is to tell people a story. Every great story is built around some sort of conflict. There has to be some sort of conflict in the story for your hero or a person to resolve. And I think the courtroom and the legal process has always been kind of fertile ground for that because we have conflict built in. Our system is kind of built around the idea that there are people that have disagreements and the courts are there to resolve those disagreements. And so I think that that's one of the things that Hollywood and other people making art have gravitated toward, this built-in conflict that they can use to then be the engine to drive these stories. I think the other thing about the legal system, that one of the reasons that it has been so popular for movies and TV shows, is the relatability, because most people haven't driven a Formula One car before. So they may not care about Brad Pitt driving a Formula One car in a movie this summer, or they've never been president of the United States. So they may not care about a movie about the president. But most people either themselves have been to court for something, traffic ticket, or maybe a family law matter, or they have friends or family members who have been to court for things. So even though they may not understand exactly how the court system works in every detail, they have some familiarity with it. And
I agree.
When they are more familiar with something, they're more likely to watch a show or a movie or something about that because they understand the world that it's built in. And so, like you said, I think there are so many reasons that this has been such a popular ground for basing shows and TVs and movies. I wanted to give us a chance, as the film nerds and TV nerds that we are, to at least talk about some of our favorites.
Let's go.
Our favorite movies, our favorite TV shows, our favorite legal stuff. Just for some historical background, the first legal film, or one of the first legal films, was actually from 1908. There's a movie called Falsely Accused. It's one of the earliest examples of a legal movie. So we're talking turn of the century, Hollywood at its infancy in 1908. And one of the first things that they decide to put on film is a courtroom drama.
And you were only 2 at the time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. My parents weren't letting me see movies at that point. And then in the 50s, television comes along. And one of the first hour-long shows on television came on in 1957. It was a little show called Perry Mason.
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it. I've heard of it. Everybody's heard of it.
Were they still doing live shows when we were still kids?
On television? I know radio was still
I remember watching reruns of Perry Mason well into my high school days.
Yeah, Perry Mason and Matlock and a lot of the 60s and 70s legal TV shows, they would rerun them either in the afternoons or in the evening. And so when you got home from school, and you popped in that microwave pizza, and maybe you watched G.I. Joe and Transformers first. But then after Transformers, it was always Perry Mason.
Perry Mason.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one.
But this is, kind of this true line that people making movies and TV shows have had with the legal process. You and I are both born in the 70s. And so our formative years, I would say late 70s, early 80s, that's where we saw a lot of the movies that I'm sure shaped our perceptions of the legal professions. And I want to talk a little bit about our favorites. A couple of things I wanted to shout out just as far as movies that really affected me and that I enjoyed. These are not from the 80s. These are actually older movies that I had to watch in school that really made an impression on me. The first one, I guess, going chronological order, was Inherit the Wind. Have you ever seen this movie?
No, news to me. Inherit the Wind?
Inherit the Wind. This was a movie that starred Spencer Tracy. This was back in 1960 when this movie came out. This movie was about the real life Scopes monkey trial that occurred in Tennessee in the 90s, I believe.
Did you just say Scopes monkey?
I said Scopes monkey trial. Are you aware of the Scopes monkey?
No, I am not. Holy cow. Okay.
In the 1950s, the state of Tennessee passed a law that banned the teaching of evolution in school. And the law said that the only thing that could be taught in Tennessee schools was creation. And Inherit the Wind tells the story of a high school teacher, the real story of a high school teacher in Tennessee who defied that ban and taught evolution to his students and was ultimately charged. That trial was, I guess, kind of the O.J. Simpson trial of its day. It was covered by all the newspapers in the country. It was a huge deal. The front page of all the newspapers. It went on for several weeks. And part of it was because the attorneys that ended up getting involved. Spencer Tracy played Clarence Darrow, who was one of the foremost legal minds at the time, who was defending the teacher in the Scopes monkey trial.
I got to go check this out.
Yeah. And then the prosecutor was William Jennings Bryan.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. And he prosecuted this case on behalf of the state of Tennessee. I believe, if I'm correct, that the movie fictionalizes it to an extent that it changes the names. So in real life, it was Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. I believe in the movie, their characters have different names. But it's a fascinating look at how the court system deals with, sensitive topics, controversial things that get put in front of a judge and how a courtroom would deal with it. Now, is it the most realistic portrayal of how a courtroom would probably work in this day and age? It's probably not. But I will say that a lot of the movie was based on the actual transcripts from the trial. You, as a judge, will appreciate this little wrinkle in that there was actually a point where William Jennings Bryan, the prosecutor for the case, actually became a witness and testified from the stand and was questioned by Clarence Darrow about his positions in the case.
And remained the prosecutor in the case.
And remained the prosecutor in the case.
Well, there you go.
So, fascinating movie if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
But yes, I highly recommend Inherit the Wind. It made a big impression on me. I did a big project about it in middle school. What were some of your favorites growing up?
Well, I mean, I will tell you, when I was in, it's either 8th or 9th grade. It had been 9th grade. We read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I fell in love with Atticus Finch and the idea of justice in that form that it portrayed it. We watched the movie as well with Gregory Peck. Remember Gregory Peck? Loved To Kill a Mockingbird. It was a very inspirational book, movie, piece of literature by Harper Lee. And to this day, still probably is one of the tops of my list of all-time favorite movies or TV shows or books for that matter. And I think it's probably a book that has arguably influenced as many judges and lawyers to get them inspired to become judges or lawyers than maybe any other book, any other single book or movie. A little tidbit about To Kill a Mockingbird. You remember the characters, right? You had Atticus Finch, you had Scout Finch. Remember Boo Radley?
Boo Radley.
Right? Mm-hmm. Who played Boo Radley?
Was it Robert Duvall?
Yes! I can't get anything past you. You are like the trivia king. It was Robert Duvall.
Like Boo Radley in the movie.
You look at him in the movie and you look at him today, you're like, that's the same guy.
Yeah.
It is the same guy.
Robert Duvall is an actor who looked the same at 30 as he does at 70.
Oh my God.
I mean, he has not aged a day, and he was 70 when he was 30 and he's 30 when he's 70. It's perfect. It works out for him.
That was Love to Kill a Mockingbird. And of course, I mean, you've got to talk about A Few Good Men. I mean, A Few Good Men was just awesome with Tom Cruise and his cross-examination of Colonel, what's his face? Jessup. Yeah, Colonel Jessup. Oh my goodness. That was just epic. Of course, looking back today at that cross-examination, you're like, yeah, that's probably like a C- cross-examination technique. Wouldn't fly in any courtroom probably, but nevertheless, it was brilliant movie making. So those are some of the earlier like movies and TV shows, of course.
I cannot believe you just said that a 1992 movie was early. Now you're making my heart hurt.
And then, of course, you touched on Matlock. Matlock was pretty big at the time, and CSI, even though it wasn't necessarily a courtroom movie, although they did go into the courtroom quite a bit. The original CSI, watched a lot of that. 2000, I think, is when that first came out, and that started the franchise of CSI movies, which we'll talk about probably in a little bit. We're gonna come back to that.
We're gonna talk about CSI. We're gonna talk about TV a little more detail. I wanted to make sure that you didn't have any other movies you wanted to shout out. A couple more just I wanted to throw out, just formative movie experiences, legal experiences in my brain. There was a movie that came out same year as Few Good Men, 1992, called My Cousin Vinny, which was a staple in the Hamner household. Was very popular. I will say that I think that there are some aspects of that movie that very accurately capture what it can be like to be in a high stakes trial of that type. Some of it is overblown and kind of over the top. And of course, we love Fred Gwynne as a judge and we love all that stuff, but just a really fun movie that takes a very serious subject and makes it fun, which is yet another example of why I think, the legal profession and courtroom dramas, and in this case, a comedy, the courtroom works so well because it can do so many different things. You can have fun with it. You can be dramatic. You can do lots of different things.
And if you go to court, and you've been doing this long enough, and I've been doing this long enough to know that there are days and there are times when you do have a little bit of fun in court. And it's not to say that it doesn't take away from the importance of what we do, but there are some moments when you get a few chuckles in court. Things happen. Life happens in court. And there can be some pretty hilarious things that happen in court, not planned, usually, but almost always unplanned. But
there's another movie called Primal Fear that I wanted to at least mention. That came out in 1996. That was a Richard Gere movie.
Yeah.
Norton was in that movie.
I remember that. Yeah.
There's a big twist that, even though this movie is 20 some years old, I'm not going to spoil it today. 30 some years.
You're not going to play spoiler.
I'm not going to spoil the movie for anybody today, but it was a really interesting analysis of a criminal prosecution and a high profile case. And Richard Gere plays the lawyer and Edward Norton plays the defendant. And for those that haven't seen it, highly recommend. And I, again, would be remiss to close the loop on movies, at least on my end, if my children, my daughters, and my wife would be very upset if I didn't at least mention Legally Blonde, the 2001 Reese Witherspoon movie.
My wife would agree.
About a young lady from California who decides she wants to become a Harvard law student. And through the course of her first year in law school, ends up first chairing a first degree murder trial in Boston, which, however we got there, whether we could or could not do that, it was a lot of fun. And it's an interesting picture of both the experience that law students have in going through law school, but also in the court process.
And you got to give a shout out to Reese Witherspoon. I mean, she killed that part, right?
It was really a great part.
I mean, she killed it.
I'm excited to see what happens in Legally Blonde 3. She made the second one. The third one is supposedly coming this year, either this year or next year. I don't think.
Did you watch Legally Blonde 2? I didn't.
I did. I live in a house with girls.
Does it even compare to the original though?
Well, it suffers from the same thing I think a lot of sequels do, in that it tries to do too much of the stuff that the first one did. And some of that is, you want some of that in a sequel because you want it to feel familiar, but you also want them to iterate on it a little bit, maybe do something a little bit different. And I don't think they do enough with it that's different.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable. If you like the first movie, you'll like the second one, but it's not as good as the first one.
And I should throw out there while we're talking about movies, a lot of the movies deal with criminal law, and rightfully so. That's usually the low-hanging fruit for entertainment. But I will tell you,
I think one of the reasons that criminal law becomes the focus is because it's easy for people to grasp. You've got somebody broke the law.
Well, I'm going to throw a shout out to a couple movies that are not criminal law based, but are fantastic movies. Have you ever seen a movie, A Civil Action with John Travolta?
I have.
Phenomenal movie.
Excellent.
Based on a true story. And that movie, I taught as an adjunct professor for many years, taught business law. And that was a must show in my college class. We watched A Civil Action and used it to relate to some of the topics that we would go into. But if anyone that's watching or listening to the podcast hasn't seen it, it's a must see. And then we watched one recently, my wife and I, but it came out in 2019. It is shocking. It will leave you dumbfounded. And many are familiar with the actual case, the DuPont case, but Dark Waters in 2019. What's the guy's name? The Hulk. He plays the Hulk.
Mark Ruffalo.
Stars in that. And
you mentioned I think you told me
Anne Hathaway,
on the air.
Anne Hathaway,
Anne Hathaway was in that too.
Yeah. Anne Hathaway, and fantastic movie. Really good movie. Heavy movie.
And I have
Just
not
saying.
seen this, so I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah,
So
great
this
movie.
is why I do this, to get
Yeah.
recommendations.
So there are
But
some
I need to
civil
be
movies
checking out.
too, civil movies, not
Mhm.
just criminal, that are phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, there are. And civil movies, just a shout out. Philadelphia is a great movie about civil law. Philadelphia, Michael Clayton, which was a movie that starred George Clooney. It came out, was about a civil action and some civil stuff. And then Aaron Brockovich, which
Oh
is
yeah,
an example of kind of law adjacent, I would call it. It's not necessarily a courtroom drama, but it's about the process that
sure.
goes into building a civil case of that type and how they go about doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, those are all great examples. On the TV side, you already kind of started us a little bit with Matlock and with CSI. Any other TV shows, any other legal procedural type shows that kind of caught you?
Well, you know how disciplined I am, right?
You're very
Very
disciplined.
disciplined.
I do know that about you.
So I'm being completely facetious. My wife and I have been binge watching The Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix. Phenomenal. We can't stop watching it. I mean, it is great, especially season 1. And I will tell you, there are aspects of it that are extremely accurate. Like there are some cross-examination scenes in those episodes that are great, would be great lessons for young attorneys or experienced attorneys learning how to do a proper cross-examination. Very good movie. If you haven't seen, and you told me you hadn't started watching it.
I have not watched.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the original movie with Matthew McConaughey
Yep.
that the series was based on, but I have not started the series. And you have given me this recommendation now a couple of times, and I'm going to have to follow it.
Some great courtroom judge interaction with the attorneys.
I love any show that has clearly done its homework, and knows how lawyers and judges talk and knows how those interactions would really sound. And then they put those on paper. Like, I'm sure lawyers and judges, we're the same way as like if there's a movie about construction workers or there's a movie about doctors or something, and a doctor watches it and they sit there and they think, oh, this isn't right. They're not using the right language. I would never say that. Well, that's probably true, because if we build too much real life into it, it won't be entertaining, right? Just to shout out a couple of my favorites as a kid, TV show wise, I always come back to Night Court. Which was one of the first TV shows that I remember really loving as a kid. Probably, and the inspiration I tell everybody when I'm interviewing and people ask me, what was your inspiration to become a judge? It was absolutely Harry T. Stone.
Oh, of course.
He was my
That makes
idol.
sense.
I thought he was awesome.
It all comes together. Right
It
now.
all
Yep.
comes together.
Yeah,
And, I always had so much fun watching that. And I thought that was such a neat experience to be able to do your job, but help people at the same time. And that's what Judge Stone always tried to do. And so that was always something that was really exciting for me. My mother was a big fan of the TV show LA Law in the 80s that was on TV all the time with Harry Hamlin and Jimmy Smits was on for a period of time. And so I remember that being a constant in my household as well. Probably not the most realistic depiction of what it's like to practice law in LA, but certainly was formative and something that I always thought about. And I guess the last TV show, and again, there are so many movies and TV shows. We're just scratching the surface. Yep. And we're not leaving anything out. We're not trying to say anything's better than anything else. But the other show I wanted to shout out today was Boston Legal, which was a show that I loved very much. I thought was very funny and enjoyed some of the legal aspects of it, but enjoyed more the camaraderie amongst the lawyers in that show. But I thought that was very accurately portrayed as the relationships between them.
Yeah, good insight into the law firm life. One of my favorite actors of all time is Billy Bob Thornton.
Yes.
What show am I going to mention?
You're going to mention Goliath.
Yes, that's great. Goliath is great.
Goliath was a very good show. Probably one of the better examples, I think, of a legal show in the last 10 years.
They did good with that one. They really did. Of course, it's ridiculous, though. Anything that could go wrong will go wrong in Goliath, right? I mean, it's Murphy's Law times 10.
It's over the top, as most Hollywood productions are that deal with the law profession, but it's still very entertaining. Is there any particular, of all these various movies and TV shows that we've talked about, is there any particular one that you would single out and tell somebody, hey, if you want to get kind of an accurate representation of what it is that judges do and what it is that lawyers do in a courtroom, is there a particular movie or a TV show that you'd point to and say, it's not perfect, but that's probably the best?
There are some that are more accurate. There are some that are just ridiculously inaccurate as far as a portrayal of how it really is in the justice system. If you ask me, is there a good scene from a show where it does a proper examination of a witness? I'd say yes, there's several. I can point you to a few. Or where the judge makes the correct rulings on certain motions or objections to evidentiary issues. Yeah, I could point to a few. And that's the thing that makes good TV shows is you sprinkle in some truths and some reality, but you also sprinkle in a lot of blown up um, uh, entertainment techniques and drama and things that make the difference. Now, I mean, I guess the answer to your question is court TV would be the most accurate if you really want to see how it really works. But even court TV is not. I mean, yeah, it's real live TV shows, but what you're not seeing is what happens off the camera, and that's where people that aren't familiar with the justice system start to realize that there is so much more. I mean, 90% of what leads up to the trial happens in the year or 2 or 3 before it gets to that point. And all the back and forth and the discovery and the pretrial motions and all of the things that lead up to that, all the things that you really go to law school and that you are mentored by lawyers when you first get into the profession that teach you how to do all that. That's what leads up to it. And you can't put that in a show. You can't put that in a movie, in my opinion. But yeah, there are some aspects of certain shows and movies that I would say that was pretty accurate. Lincoln Lawyer, for example, season 1. You want to see some good examination of witness techniques, or you want to see some good crossing, go watch that. You want to see some pretty good rulings by the judge on some objections. I thought they were spot on some of their objections regarding hearsay and foundational issues with trying to get in some exhibits. Very good objections. I almost wondered if maybe a lawyer or someone with a legal background was helping them in producing the series. But what about you?
Well, I loved your answer to that question because you hit on exactly what I would have wanted to say and was going to say, is that there probably isn't. If you're looking to learn something about our legal system and how it actually works, if you're a pro se litigant, or if you're going to be going to court and you're like, well, what can I expect, or how should I behave, or what should I do? Don't watch a movie. Don't watch a TV show.
Yeah,
Don't walk
yeah.
in and try to be Al Pacino or any of the other people that you see in these movies and TV shows. That's not going to work because that's not how it is. And I think your suggestion actually of watch a little court TV, that's actually a great suggestion. That is at least a live kind of unfiltered look. Another thing that you can seek out is true crime documentaries, and a lot of them actually have the courtroom stuff, the actual courtroom stuff that occurred that's built into those documentaries. I suggest look at that.
But they're spliced.
But they are spliced. You do have to
cut
be careful
off.
with that.
They plug and play what they want to play to make it more interesting.
Yeah, but
even the reality is not really reality.
But at least it's actual courtroom stuff.
Right.
You know that this is actual things that a lawyer said or a judge said. And so while it is heavily edited, at least it's real to that extent.
And it gives you glimpses of reality.
It gives you glimpses of reality. I know as a trial judge, one of the things with jurors and people, they didn't understand how long sometimes the process would take. They expected that they would just walk in, tell the judge what was going on, and they'd get a ruling and go home that day. And I know in your experience, that hasn't been the case, and it certainly wasn't in my case. Is that something that you've noticed, the litigants and people having an unrealistic expectation of how quickly things will move?
I think if you go out and you interview the average person who's not a lawyer on the street, hey, how long do you think a serious felony case with a victim, how long do you think that case from beginning to end takes? I'll be, probably a long time, like 2 months, 3 months. Yeah. Let's turn those months into years, and you're probably getting closer to the reality of a contested case. They don't realize everything that goes on behind the scenes and how long it really does take to get the evidence gathered and the discovery done. You have to consolidate a trial into a 2-hour show or a 2-hour movie. Or even if you're doing an entire season, they're 40 minutes on average per episode, 40, 45 minutes once you factor in commercials or whatever. So if you're getting your perception of the reality of the justice system from TVs and movies, then it's naturally your timing is going to be off. It's not how it works in the real world. It just isn't. And so that's the biggest thing, is the perception that the public has. And frankly, it gives the perception that the justice system is not functioning very well because it takes too darn long to get things to trial. And do I agree? Does it take a long time? Yes, it does. But I guarantee you those lawyers that are working those major cases, they're working behind the scenes to get discovery done, to get their client out of jail, to, if they're in jail, or, get the pretrial motions done, try to do suppression hearings, 491 hearings. We're getting into legal jargon, but you know what I mean? There's a lot that has to be done behind the scenes. It's kind of like an iceberg.
Right.
How much of the iceberg do you see? You see that tip of the iceberg, and then there's like 90% of it's under the water. Well, 90% of that case happens before it gets to trial, and that's a long time.
Absolutely. And, certainly as a trial judge, every case is different. And there's a million reasons why cases take so long. It can be lawyer issues. It can be related to court calendar. It can be related to issues with witnesses who aren't even parties to the case, who have scheduling conflicts or other things going on.
Right.
Or people get sick, people die. All sorts of crazy things can happen when you're putting a trial together. And particularly with the most important cases, you're talking about really serious criminal cases or really big civil cases. You want to make sure everything is right because it's so important and it's so high stakes for everybody. And usually you only get one shot at a trial. And so most good attorneys are going to make sure that absolutely everything is taken care of and it's where it needs to be before that case is tried. And that just takes time.
As we're talking about this, I started thinking about some of the TV shows and movies that I've watched where the crime occurs at the beginning of the episode. And by the end of the 40-minute episode, they're in trial.
Or going to prison.
And you think, okay, well, they're doing like a fast forward. No, they're not. They're literally, after the trial, they're going back and talking to the young child witness that made the mistake, last week when the case started. Hey, it's okay, man. This is, that's not how it works. You don't have a crime and a week later have a trial. Mm-hmm. That's not how it works. But yet in our society, we expect a conclusion when we start to watch something.
Like you see this on TV, you may see this in a movie, but if you actually go to court and you come and see an actual judge and you have an actual lawyer, you're not going to see that. Is there anything else you can think of?
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a big one. And in fact, that has led to some changes in development in the way that we handle things in the justice system. It's been appropriately coined the CSI effect. And you remember that as trial judge, when you're voir direing, you're doing your jury selection process. Especially if it's a case that involves physical evidence, you want to make sure that you question the potential jurors about their understanding of reality when it comes to physical evidence and lab results and what expectations there can be. If you watch CSI, like I love CSI, but if you watch one of those, you think, okay, if the perpetrator's hand touches a table, you'll be able to find out who he is because he's going to leave epithelials all over that table. And you're going to be able to get the results of those epithelials and find out that it's his DNA within 24 hours. In the real world, how long does it take to get DNA results? And what are the chances that you're going to really be able to get epithelials off of a table if my hand touches that table for a split second? I mean, they think that evidence works like you see it on TV, that with CSI, these guys are brilliant. They can find physical evidence from anything. Heck, maybe the epithelials are floating in the air and they can use a swab and swab the air and put it in a little test tube and send it off to the lab and find out who is in the room. It was cool to watch because it does get into their version of some pretty cool laboratory science stuff that finds its way into evidence, that finds its way into courtrooms. But the CSI effect is a real deal. You got to understand that not all crime scenes leave behind the kind of evidence you're going to see on TV. And so and one of, if not the most important aspect of a trial, which is the jury selection process, a good trial attorney will touch on that issue and tamper down the person's perception of what evidence looks like in the real world.
I think you're absolutely right. And certainly every single jury trial that I was involved in and presided over, the attorneys asked the jury about that, about those issues. And I think it's not just from a evidence collection perspective, but it's a presentation perspective. Because, on CSI and these other things, they've got all these cool 3D models and they've got all these graphs and charts and they build AI powered recreations and things like that. And that's all awesome. And all of that stuff is possible. But all of that stuff costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And most local sheriff's departments, most local police departments in the state of Missouri and in most jurisdictions don't have the resources to do those types of things. And so people sometimes come in expecting this Hollywood production for evidence. And all they're going to get is a couple of photographs, maybe blown up on the wall. And they're going to get a witness who's going to say, this is what I saw. And I think sometimes I had at least one juror after a jury trial tell me they were disappointed that it wasn't more of a show.
Right.
That there wasn't a recreation, that there wasn't all this stuff. And it's absolutely something as trial judges and as lawyers is keeping people's expectations realistic about what it is they're going to see.
CSI effect is a real deal. And in fact, it seems like some of the instructions that we have crafted over the years, our jury instructions, touched on those just ever so slightly in indirect ways to make sure that they give proper instructions to jurors that are sitting in a case. that there is not necessarily one piece or lack of piece of evidence that disqualifies an entire case. And you got to look at the case as a whole, use your common sense judgment and reasoning skills to come to a conclusion. Anyways, the CSI effect's a big deal. There's one thing that you see on TV more than you probably should, is that on TV, the role of the judge is expanded way more than it really is in real life. I mean, we're really supposed to just call balls and strikes in a trial. In real life, the judge's role is much more boring than it's portrayed on TV. Like, I've watched some shows where the judge will actually get out of the chair and examine the witness in his robe about certain things, like, well, officer, you say this, and it's like a third examination. You got the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and then the judge gets down there and starts questioning the witness about certain things, and then catches the witness in a lie, and then finds against the prosecution on a certain issue. And it's not how it really works in real life. The judge is not a party to the action, but yet it sure does make for good TV when the judge finally gets up in his robe and her robe and walks down there and says, well, and starts grilling the witness. So the role of the judge is not like it's portrayed on TV.
And that's absolutely for dramatic purposes, because you and I both know as trial judges that most of the work that a judge does is behind the scenes. It's with the lawyers before there's a jury in the jury box, before there's an audience in the courtroom. That's where all that work gets done. Our instructions and our trial procedures and the way they're set, they're designed so that when the jury is in the box, we're supposed to be as invisible as possible. We don't want people to know we're even there. This is the lawyer's show. This is their case. This is their evidence. It's what they're putting on. And the less involved with it we are, the more likelihood it is that jury is going to focus on the evidence and going to make a decision based on that.
That's right. The worst thing that can happen is if the jury is focusing on the judge and getting their cues from the judge or the judge's actions. But I will say, when at trial or contested hearings, the role of the judge in ruling on evidentiary objections is very crucial. And there are some good portrayals of that in certain TV shows and in movies where it's kind of surprising how correct they get it, that the judge properly overrules an objection or properly sustains an objection. So that, to that degree, there are some aspects of movies and the cinema scene that get it right.
Is there anything in those movies or TV shows that we've seen that they portray that isn't real, but we wish it was? I mean, what is it that we see? I mean, my simple answer would be the timing issue. I sure wish that we could wrap everything up as quickly as they do on TV or in a movie. Right. It would be better for the litigants. It would be great. Is there anything else that you see portrayed in these movies, TV shows that you wish?
No, that's a great question. I wish that we could speed things up by sending, drugs to be tested in laboratories. I know that we could get them back in 24 to 48 hours. I wish that DNA evidence could turn around in that amount of time so that it would speed up the life of the case, speed up the discovery process, speed up the time that people may be sitting in jail. We don't want our jails filled up with individuals merely accused of crimes. We hope that they're released and that we can keep the public safe. And oftentimes, the prolonging of these trials does have a pretty serious effect on people, even if they're not in custody. It still is tough on defendants and tough on victims, on all parties involved. It takes a long time. We say that our real world experience is boring, but I think the average person might disagree. I think more than we think, average people are intrigued by the real world courtroom setting and the things that go on in court and the arguments that are made. That's just a thought.
I think you're probably exactly right. And that's actually the perfect place is where I wanted to leave our discussion today, which is we love these movies. We love TV shows. We love all the legal stuff. And I've had just a blast talking with you about all of this today.
Same here.
But to anybody who is listening to this podcast, who has made it this far with us today, if you want some advice on you're serious about wanting to know what it's really like in court and learning about it, come see us.
Yeah.
All of the courts in our state are open.
They're open.
Dockets are published and they're put out and you can find out what's going on what days. Come in, have a seat. Most of our proceedings are open to the public on the very rare exceptions of certain things that have to be closed. Otherwise, everything is open to the public. Come see us, sit for an hour or two, see the lawyers, see them interact with their clients, see them interact with the court, see how the process actually works. If you really want to learn something about it, and I tell you what, you don't have to pay a subscription to a streaming service.
That's right.
You don't have to buy a ticket. It is completely free. Come on down and see us anytime.
I think that's a great recommendation. And I have had a wonderful time visiting with you, and I'm thankful and honored that you asked me to come and join you on this podcast. What a topic. What a topic. You've given me some homework to take home. Thank you very much for having me. It was a blast.
I want to thank Judge Aaron Koeppen for joining us today. He has been an awesome guest, as I knew he would be. To all those who are hanging with us here on this podcast, we appreciate you being here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on all of your various podcast formats. You want to see our smiling faces in video, don't forget to check us out on YouTube as well. Also, please don't forget to follow the Missouri Supreme Court's Facebook and Instagram pages. There's a lot of cool stuff that Michelle, who's producing our podcast today, is putting up there. We thank Michelle for all of her hard work on this. And without anything further to be discussed, this podcast is adjourned. Thank you, Judge Kopp.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, that is a line. Okay. So we're extending our podcast right now at Michelle's request, by the way. If she asks for it, she gets it. There is a scene that I'm sure all of you are familiar with in A Few Good Men, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when Tom Cruise is, so you're Jack Nicklaus and I'm Tom Cruise, right? And Jack Nicklaus is the Colonel.
Shouldn't I be? Never mind. Go ahead.
Are you going to make some comment about my hair?
No, I was just going to say I think I'm more the Tom Cruise.
That's not true. People tell me I look like Tom Cruise all the time.
Okay, gotcha.
Anyways, it's the trial. These two young soldiers are being charged with manslaughter.
It was murder.
Was it murder? Mm-hmm. Okay, of a soldier. And they were naive soldiers that were following orders from this, well, very ambitious colonel. Colonel, what is his name?
Jessup,
yeah. The cross-examination scene. And if Tom Cruise goes here and doesn't succeed, he's done. He's going to get court-martialed, kicked out of the JAG, and it's all or nothing. But if he succeeds, then the truth comes out and he spares these two young soldiers of loss of freedom. So anyways, he's got to get the colonel to admit that he ordered the code red. And if he can do that, then he wins the case. This is me being Tom Cruise. Colonel, did you order the code red?
Well, and then at this point, there's an objection.
Yes. Kevin Bacon objects. Objection, Your Honor.
And the judge says, you don't have to answer that question. And Colonel Jessup says, I'll answer the question. You want answers.
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
And then you go on to lecture me about how...
Do you want the lecture?
Yeah. You know it? Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's going to do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives, and that my existence, while incomprehensible and grotesque to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use phrases like honor, code, loyalty. We use them as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post.
Did you order the code red?
I did my job.
Did you order the code red?
You're right, I did.
That was awesome.
I did that scene in high school as a dramatic interpretation. So I know
nice.
I know the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, that was excellent. You can't handle the truth. Oh, that's great. That was fun. Yeah, you surprised me. I did not think you had that in you. I was going to give you the thumbnail, but I didn't have word for word.
I was really impressed that you got like 80% of that right.
Well, it's been a long time.
It has been a long time.